Computer. Hello and welcome once again to the Small Bear Show. I'm your host, Alex S. Johnson, aka the Small Bear. And there is an origin story to that one, which is kind of fascinating, but don't really have time. And one of the main reasons I don't have time for that is because we have a very distinguished author as our special guest today, Mr. Thomas M. Malafarina. He's been in just about everything with everybody. I mean, talking about like your Jonathan Maybury and your as a prolific author of dark fiction. Also has written two memoirs and a collection of cartoons, and he's here with us today to speak of about, among other things, his contribution to our forthcoming anthology. I'm the chief editor and publisher of Nocturnicorn Books, which is a boutique literary imprint that's in operating out of Carmichael, California. It's a suburb of Sacramento, the state capital, and we're also published out of Caen, France, actually through Dean M. Drinkle is our affiliate, and we've put out a number of anthologies and solo collections over the past decade, including Axis of Evil, Heavy Metal Horror Anthology, featuring original work by the likes of Paula D. Ashe, Lucy Taylor, Sephra Giron was in that one, John Claude Smith. Put out my own Doom Hippies series. Our latest, some of our more recent anthologies include The Junk Merchants, a literary tribute to William S. Burroughs, Volume 1, which features original work by the co-founder of the Runaways, Carrie Lee Chrome, who founded the Runaways with Joan Jett. And there's an original piece by Carrie. There's work by Jarbo from Swans, Gothic Industrial Pioneer. There's an original piece from David J. Haskins, who's the co-founder of the bands um, Bauhaus and Love and Rockets, and was responsible for a little jam you may have heard of, Bela Lugosi's Dead. And it's did I mention this is an all-star imprint? Uh, it has a foreword by Horror Writers Association Lifetime Achievement Award winner Graham Masterton, who also wrote The Manitou and as well as The Rules of Duel with William S. Burroughs himself, and an introduction by Billy Martin, aka Poppy Z. Bright, who is the um, best-selling author of such classics as Lost Souls, Drawing Blood, Exquisite Corpse, Swamp Fetus, and also has written nonfiction more recently, a uh, a, uh, a book about um, religion and spirituality in the work of Stephen King. So we're very fortunate and honored to have people like David J. Haskins and Poppy Z. Bright on our team. And so, Thomas, I
Yes.
I'm 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 grateful that you were proactive with looking into getting a microphone so we could actually record a session. We did a session. When was it? It was
Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, it was Tuesday. So now it is Thursday, and and it just didn't work out. We're doing a ghetto fix with my landline speaker phone, which is a crappy little speaker phone, and we're getting triple feedback anyway. It just didn't work. And so anyway, we're here with you now. And so let's start out. You were showing me some of your cartoons, and which are very amusing and very obviously a little bit juvenile. I don't mind. I was called Beautifully Vulgar by Jeff Thomas. And so tell me about how you started out, doing your cartoons and how those your tunes, which they seem to be like very much inspired by the style, reminds me of Gay and Wilson, which is, high praise indeed. Gay and Wilson, right? It's the master. And so how did you get started doing these cartoons?
I started cartooning probably when I was about 5 or 6. My my favorite back then, as being a little kid, I would try to copy the Peanuts. Charles,
Schultz.
yeah,
Yeah.
Schultz, Charles
Yeah.
Schultz. Thank you, brain fart.
No worries.
I tried copying Charles Schultz cartoons.
Yeah.
Eventually got into Mad Magazine and tried copying Don Martin,
Oh yeah,
Sergio
Don Martin.
Ramos,
Yeah,
and
for
all those
sure.
guys.
Uh,
Copying their styles till I could eventually evolve my own style.
yeah.
Back in eighth, ninth grade, I was into Peter Max and copying his style
Oh
of
my
drawing.
God. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yes.
who I actually got to meet maybe about 10 years ago at a
He's
art show.
still around, or is he?
I don't know if he still is. He
Oh
was then,
wow.
but it was kind of funny because there was this guy who was so influential
Yeah.
to a generation, and I saw him at the King of Prussia Mall in an art store. And before the show started, he was just standing out there, standing out there looking over the railing, and people were walking by, had absolutely no idea that they
Peter
were watching,
Max?
a
Oh my
master.
God, the man is a legend.
It was
Wow.
great. But yeah, I used to copy his stuff, and eventually and of course, Gay and Wilson and uh, Sam Gross, all
Oh
those guys.
yes.
So eventually, when you're doing that, people look at Charles Schultz stuff at Charlie Brown. So it's just a circle with a little little thing for hair.
Right.
But even if you can copy it almost identically, it's still missing. It's missing Schultz. It looks like a copy.
Yes.
So what I did is through the years, I ended up evolving my own style, which is a bit of this, a bit of that. It changes depending what mood I'm in. Sometimes I'll do a cartoon that's very simple,
Right.
line cartoon. Other times I'll go into a great detail, too much detail.
Right.
But that's probably when I start looking like Gay and Wilson. When you get into that kind of stuff. But yeah, just over the years, I've always done it. When I was working, if the company had a newspaper or a newsletter, I would do things for those. Or if people I work with were part of a community um, organization that needed things done, I would do that for them. So it's like writing. I've been writing forever. I've been drawing forever, and I've been playing music forever. It's just
Right.
what I do.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, same here. Same here. That's how I kind of got out of, being beaten up like every day,
Mm-hmm.
by the school bullies as opposed to every other day, where they would
Mm-hmm.
leave me alone because I would write stories and they loved my stories. So, and I was just crap at sports and math and things like that. But I was really good at, like, I always won the spelling bee. They needed somebody to be on their spelling bee team. They'd look at me. If they needed somebody to do the, poster art for the school or whatever, they'd look at me.
Mm-hmm.
So, in a lot of ways, like I think like on a biological level, like having compensatory skills is sort of like allows us to be evolutionarily, fit, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine if we just were sucked at everything. Like you're an engineer as well, so you're able to use that left brain, the left brain, right brain thing, and we've got a few contributors who are like also scientists, like my friend Caitlin R. Kiernan. who's also a vertebrate paleontologist, which is
Mhm.
fascinating because, she gets to work with dinosaurs, right? I mean,
Yeah.
how cool is that? And then like and that's her day job, right? So just imagine, you know, being able to work with dinosaur bones. That's so cool. Um, and also you and I share um uh artwork. I mean, doing artwork with Jeff Thomas, who's one of my, good friends and a regular contributor to um to to our imprint. You've written, I think, two memoirs about your, growing up in a kind of a rural town
Mhm.
and could you tell me about those?
Yeah. Here is, I'll show you the first one, which is called Growing Up Skook.
Oh, wow.
And what that has to do with is growing up during the 60s in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, small town.
Right.
But it's really more than that. It's about growing up in any small town in the country in the 60s.
Yeah.
Uh, on the back, it says, let me show you the back. It's got, by the way, that Whistler's mother statue is one of the tourist attractions in
Oh, I
Ashland.
didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. And it says, for example, growing up in the 1960s in small town America had its charms for the baby boomer generation, and you can't get much more small town than Ashland and Schuylkill County. In Growing Up Skook, baby boomer author, me, Thomas
Ah,
M. Malafarina, provides personal and humorous anecdotes about growing up in the Skook, as they call Schuylkill County, that anyone who grew up in a small town in the 60s can relate to and can enjoy. And it's true stories, things that happened to me as a little kid. And then we're just releasing the second one, which is more stories from the Scoop.
nice.
Yeah, you can see, and that's another tourist attraction from Ashland, the Pioneer Tunnel.
Oh,
It's
wow.
a train ride and a mine tour. You can go down in a mine car into a coal mine because
Oh,
it's a
wow.
coal town. Schuylkill County is a coal area. And then, of course, that's me when I was about 5
Oh, nice.
on the back. Yeah. So yeah, this one was the first one was very well received, and a lot of people wanted another one. So, but one of the things that I mentioned in both of these is I didn't want to do either of them.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
horror fiction is what I like,
Yes.
but my wife is from the Reading area, Exeter Township, and what little she knows about Schuylkill County is stories that I've told her, my
Mhm.
kids, and my grandkids.
Yeah.
And one day she said to me, you ought to take all those stories and put them into a book. They're very enjoyable. People will enjoy reading them. She said, but you got to make it sound like John Grisham. And I'm like, no, 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 no. John Grisham's like the master. He could read a phone book and
Right.
I'd listen to it. But I said, I can't write like Stephen King or I can't write like Dean Koontz, but I still write horror.
Yeah.
So I'll write it like myself. And I did, and it was well received. And like I said, people wanted another one. In fact, she came up with the title, Growing
Oh,
Up
wow.
School. That wasn't even my title, it was hers. And the nice thing about this is, well, I'll say it's a nice thing, but it was the most terrifying thing about it for me is that she had to read it before I send it to my editor. And she does not read a word I write. All the 30 horror books I've written, she hasn't read a word
Oh,
because she hates
wow.
horror. And I knew she was going to read this, and I knew if she didn't like it, nobody was going to like it because, uh, how do you? I didn't know how to relate to normal people. We write horror. We don't relate to normal people,
Yeah.
but somehow I pulled it off, and everybody who read it liked it and asked for another one, so I did another one,
And
and
that's
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 just coming
that's
out.
that's fascinating that you and your wife have so much in common, that
Mhm.
you're able to like relate to each other and totally bypass your favorite genre, which is horror.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you guys like to do?
Oh, we like to go see different things, travel. We just got back from Maine. We were up in uh, Bar Harbor and Booth Bay. We like to go down to these little towns where they have different, stores, variety type of crafty
Right.
artsy stores. We go
Nice.
into those.
Yeah.
We do a lot of stuff together. In fact, we're always together now that we're
Oh,
retired. We're together all the time, and we do home projects, home improvement.
right.
Usually, what happens? Oh, and then most of my paintings that I do, and I have paintings. They're not behind me, but
Yeah.
paintings downstairs. Usually, what happens is it's funny. She's a very good motivator. She'll say, I'd like a painting in the bedroom of this. Can you do that? I don't think so. I don't know if oh, you can do it. You can
Uh-huh.
do it. So I'll sit down and I'll do it. And then we hang it up. I did a wood burning. I never wood burned in my life, but I bought a wood burning kit and I
Nice.
did a wood burning because she said, I like to see this in a wood burn. So I did it. So she's a big motivator. Uh, and even though she doesn't encourage, I shouldn't say she doesn't encourage, she just tolerates my horror writing. You know, uh, it just lets me go ahead and do it. So I mean, every book I write, I dedicate to her because
That's awesome.
she's my inspiration for the last 34 years. Yeah,
That's so cool to hear. Yeah, a
yeah.
lot of people like struggle and I'm really happy for you that you found somebody, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so last time we were talking about like we have an anthology series called A Collective Paw, and this is for an animal rights um, series. Is for, all the proceeds go to animal rights. And it was an anthology concept that was came out of a poem by our dear friend Ellen Mabey, and the poet and actress, and she was in the movie Dancing at the Blue Iguana with opposite Sandra Oh. So she's pretty, very 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 well known, poet, and she had this line in her poem Whiff of Wonder, a collective paw. And I and my partner, Leah Celeste Williams, were listening to watching a video that she did where she's reading this poem. And we looked at each other and go, a collective paw. What an amazing idea, what an
Mhm.
amazing concept. And from there, it sort of snowballed. So I thought, you know, this is sort of like, I'm a big fan of, filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino. He has a band apart, right? It's always very iconic when you're watching his movies, right? And I thought, so what if I do a sub imprint of my imprint, Nocturnicorn Books, and I call it A Collective Paw, right? And because it really kind of captured to me this whole ethos of like, we don't want to just be another, horror publisher. Like, I mean, with all due respect to, Crystal Lake and the Cemetery Dance, of course, they're the gold standard for horror. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm not hardcore. None of my friends are hardcore, and that includes, you know, Billy Martin, Poppy Zebright. None of us are hardcore people. We're all softies. We love animals, and especially love animals. So I thought, and then I got a message from my friend and you know, um, Nicole H6, uh, and she wanted to know, you know, how she could submit to a collective paw. And I said, well, Nicole, it's not really an anthology, but it's like she says it's not. I said no, it's more of a name for our sub imprint. But would you like it to be? She said, yeah, because she works with stray cats, and in LA. And she, grew up in the, Colorado, foster care system. So I think she sort of identifies, with these stray cats. She's a very, very beautiful and compassionate person. And from there, I was sort of like, okay, so if we do an animal rights book, right? I look at my regular contributors and say, hey, Billy Martin, could I use your story, The Devil You Know, from the eponymous story from his collection, um, which has it has a cover by Alan, um, what's it? Alan, we were talking about. uh, Ellen M. Clark, right? Ellen M. Clark did that the cover for that book, and then we have people like Lee Bales, Anna Taborska, Benjamin Adams, and a number of our friends, Jan Steckel. Anyway, long story short, so we just put this out there, and the first volume, or Lauren Soares is also in it, and Lauren Soares um just just the other day, like he he promoted it on Facebook and he tagged me, Billy Martin, Caitlin R. Kiernan, and Jeff Thomas, which to me is just sort of like I made it big, Mama. I made it in horror. So I got, a Bram Stoker award-winning author has just, you know, like promoted my anthology, right? So thank you, Lauren. You're the best. Um, so I totally derailed myself. But on Tuesday when we last spoke, Thomas and I were talking about how animals are sort of like in Thomas's phrase, nice little people. And, could you like I want to talk about your animals because just your dog. No, I falsely identified your dog as a cat for some
That's
reason.
one of them back there.
Yeah,
He's
and
pretty relaxed.
yes.
Yes, that's we have two dogs. That one is Benny. He is a Cavapoo, which
Mhm.
is part Cavalier King Charles and part Poodle. Our other one, who's around here somewhere, is his name is Copper. He's a purebred Cavalier King Charles. He's deaf; he can't hear. And then we have three cats. We have an orange cat and a gray cat and one that's supposed to be part Maine Coon, but she's small. But yeah, we have three cats and two dogs, and I think I mentioned the other day our backyard is something of an oasis for animals.
Nice.
I have about 20 bird houses. We have bird feeders, bird baths. We have squirrels. We have chipmunks. We have birds. This week, somebody must have lost a parakeet, and he's in our yard, in our tree. We tried to catch him, but we couldn't. I don't know. We tried finding out who he belongs to,
Oh,
but
wow.
nobody's claimed him. But he's still out there, and we're hoping he survives. I don't know. He disappears, then he comes back. He always comes back to our feeder. And actually, I guess he's a she from what people have been telling me. But this is an actual. I don't know if you can see that. That's an actual picture of
Oh,
the
wow.
parakeet sitting in our magnolia tree.
Holy Toledo.
Yeah, so she was out there this morning. We got hummingbirds. We get everything. So yeah, we like animals.
But we actually we were visited by this Lahore pigeon. Have you ever seen a Lahore pigeon?
No, no.
They're a freaky looking bird. I mean, they're beautiful, but they're sort of freaky looking because they have feathers over their talons.
Oh,
Sort of
okay.
look like a weird, they're a weird ass pigeon.
Hmm.
And very, very distinctive looking. And this guy had an attitude, man. I mean, you could some animals you can feel like they're like this this guy felt like he was a reincarnated Persian prince or something. Like he was just like strutting around and you know sort of demanding to be fed, but then he wanted to do it himself, and it was actually stranded in the rain. So the guy was like, he was completely soaked, and it was just miserable in our backyard, and sort of like that. We felt so bad for him until we came to understand that some birds are just assholes. You're
Hmm.
just like completely like took over the entire house, and it's sort of like, yeah, man. I own this place, strutting around. And so we finally got him out, and then and he didn't leave. And it was sort of like, oh, so you want us to feed us? Feed you? Everything was in his terms. Like he didn't he seemed to not understand that we were his benefactors. He was sort of like, yeah, man, yeah, you should be feeding me, bitches. And I just felt like this guy had an attitude problem. I tried to befriend him. I was like, I tried to like, just chill with him or whatever. Finally, he just took off. Oh, you're welcome, Lahore pigeon from hell.
Mhm.
Like speaking of like animal horror, animal horror, right? Robert E. Howard was one of my favorite all-time horror stories, Pigeons from Hell, which I'm
Mhm.
including in the sequel, A Collective Paw 2. So I would love to have something from you, Thomas, for that one. Um,
I
and
will get the juices flowing, and I'll definitely come up with something for you.
cool.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, later today, probably, I'll be sending you one for the Beatles.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'd like
Wow,
to.
that's quick. Yeah, you certainly do not.
Somebody just ran through here. One of the cats just ran through here.
Yeah, your first the first thing I published from you was actually in the Floppy Shoes Apocalypse
Yeah.
2 anthology, which had featured like Ramsey Campbell was in that one, and I just recall that your story stood out to me because not all the stories, and I won't name any names, but some of the authors I had to like just rewrite the crap out of them um,
Mhm.
for the stories to work. I'm not talking about like H.R. Boldwood, who's really, 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 really good author, and Floppy Shoes 3 is coming out. It's going to come out when it comes out, but Thomas has a piece in that one as well. And I just was struck by how your stories had a kind of like an EC Comics quality to them. I mean, they reminded me of those old EC horror comics, as well
Mhm.
as, Robert Bloch wrote a lot of those stories, and some of them were adapted from like Ray Bradbury was also
Mhm.
like, he's not as well known for his horror stories, but he wrote some horror stories, man.
Yeah,
Like, do you ever read The Veldt?
that was a cat.
That was a cat.
I'm sorry. Did I ever read?
The Ray Bradbury story, The Veldt.
No, no, I did not.
It was a sort of about this like proto virtual reality portal. It wasn't a virtual reality portal. It was like a actual time space portal
Mm.
where these two evil children um, find a way to import the savannah into their living room and have these like their and feed their parents to these
Oh,
wild
okay.
animals, and it's
Yeah.
just frightening as hell, man. You know, um, Ray Bradbury, as I lived for like 20 years in LA, and so I we saw Ray Bradbury a couple of times. I think speak a couple of times. He's certainly one of my I know Caitlin is a huge fan of his. I mean, really, as was one of the greatest authors in dark fiction. And I think also one of the greatest stylists
Hmm.
because he had that very, very clear, distinct line as well as being very poetic as well. And and speaking of LA, because you and I were talking about this last time about Craig Spector, and
Hmm.
I was pleasantly surprised to find that you would actually knew him and that he'd kind of given you some advice. Or so, could you tell us again, my viewers again about Craig?
Yeah, sure. Back, let's see, I've been publishing for 15 years, and I'd say probably 2 years before that, when I was thinking about it, I was working on my first book, but it was actually a screenplay. And then I turned it into a book instead because it didn't really get a lot of attention as a screenplay because I had too much detail in it.
Right.
I learned that directors actually like to direct. They don't want to be told what to do.
Okay.
So yeah, and back then I was trying to figure out how to get published, and I was trying to remember and trying to find my emails, and I couldn't find them. But I do know that somehow I had gotten in touch with Craig Spector, and he had given me some good advice. I can't tell you what it is now because it's been so long ago, but it inspired me and encouraged me. Probably was related to rejection, I would think, because
Yeah.
one of the first things you got to get used to is rejection, and not, a lot of people will submit something and it gets rejected, and they want to write back and they want to know why they were rejected and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, and all this stuff. And I think a lot of it helped me dealing with editors because one editor might love your work, another editor might hate the exact same piece.
Exactly.
Uh, and he was very helpful in that regard. And the funny thing is, I mentioned the other day, is that way back before I ever thought about, well, I shouldn't say before I ever thought about writing, because I've always thought about writing books, but back when I was busy working and
Yeah.
not considering writing, probably 40 years ago, maybe 35, 40 years ago, I went to the Berkshire Mall, which is here in Berks County. And then they had a Walden bookstore, and there
Right.
was two long-haired guys sitting at a table signing this book called Light at the End.
Yeah.
And it ended up being John Skip and Craig Spector. And I didn't realize at the time they were originally from, I believe, the Lancaster, York area, which is only about 50 miles, 30 miles to Lancaster,
Hold
50 to
hold that
York.
thought because I have a visual
Yeah.
for our viewers. Yeah, these long-haired guys.
Yeah. And
Skip
they
and
were,
Craig
yeah, that's the
Spector.
book. That's the book,
And this is
which was
yeah,
awesome, by the way. Yeah.
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 It's one of the best
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
novels ever written. Yeah, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
That was very inspirational, that book. And yeah, so they signed it, and I just thought that was so cool. And then periodically, you know, I'd see different things about them. I believe they were in, what was the movie they were in?
They were Nightbreed
Nightbreed. Is
and
that the
Night
one?
of the Living Dead, the Tom
Yeah, they were in one
Savini.
where they played zombies. I
They
forget
play
which one that
zombies,
was.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That might have been, I forget which one that was. But anyway, yeah. So now Craig lives in Virginia Beach,
yeah.
and periodically I'll talk to him on Facebook. But
He's pretty
I've never,
badass.
to say we know each other, probably not. But he
Yeah,
was an inspiration
yeah.
anyway. So he knows. And I told him that I sent him for his birthday. I let him know what an inspiration he was to me, and I said, you like writing horror. Well, you just created a monster because I've got, 30 books out there. And I said, they're all your fault.
Huh? Yeah, he really was a huge he was a in fact I would say that in many respects that Craig is responsible for my entire career. You know, not only was he extremely generous with his time when he gave me an exclusive interview for Into the Darkness magazine, which was Necro Publications, which also published people like Edward Lee and Charlie Jacob, and I just back in the 90s, and so just so I just found out that my favorite author, whatever, they're like the Twins of Terror, right? They're
Mhm.
the Splat Pack had just broken up, and I was like, is this like the Beatles breaking up? It was like,
Mhm.
damn, man, as a fan, I just was heartbroken. So there was this local bookstore called Bookham Mysteries in South
Mhm.
Pasadena, California, and I used to go there all the time. I was looking, I was looking in their really, really good horror section, and I was looking for just whatever. And I was like, wow, you guys have some, Skip and Spectre. And then I looked inside and I was like, oh, wow, they're signed. And they said, yeah, we just had them, actually, I think it may have been just Skip, we just had Skip, right? And so I was like, okay, cool. What's going on with John and Craig? And they said, maybe you want to talk to Craig. And then like 3 days later, I get this call in the middle of the night. It's like, hey, Alex, is this Alex S. Johnson? And I was like, yeah. I was like, this is Craig Spector. And he's super intense, right? Super
Mhm.
intense, but he's Russian. So he always reminded me of like the kind of character that might be portrayed by Viggo Mortensen in a David Cronenberg film. Like, that guy, he's that guy, super intense. And I just had a really quick anecdote because I want to keep, talking about like I want to get into the Clive Barker book. But so there was this, poetry venue. It was a kind of it was a coffee bar in Pasadena, home of the Rose Parade, yeah, and that one, and the Doodah Parade, and which I was in too as well. And so they were having some tough times, and they were like listed. I didn't realize until more recently how famous they were, but they were even sort of, there was a whole, write up in the LA Times about them when they finally went belly up because they would have such, financial problems, even though it was a really, really beloved watering hole for the local, Pasadena arts community, right? A lot of people, loved that place. And so anyway, so I, I asked, Craig if he had ever been to the E-Bar, and he said no. So I said, check it out. It's really, really cool place. And so we were sitting there, we were just talking, whatever. And I think at the time the latest issue of the Pasadena Weekly had an article about the Mutter Museum in
Oh yeah,
right
Philadelphia.
in Philadelphia, right, with all these mutant like fetuses in jars and shit. It's like, yeah, and I was and he was like, cool. And so I said, hey Craig, the E-Bar, they're they're they might have to close because they're having some tough financial problems and they can't solve their money situation. He said, let me talk to the owner. And it was like, you remember that scene in The Godfather where uh you know um where Michael Corleone summons the father of
Mhm.
the 16-year-old girl he wants to
Yeah.
marry, right? And he's like sort of like with great respect and everything, but he's the new godfather, right? And he's what was that actor Al played Michael Corleone in a way.
Oh yeah, Al Pacino.
Al Pacino, right? He's Al Pacino. So
Mhm.
he's got that gravitas and he's incredibly intimidating. Well, Craig Spector he's a good guy. He's a solid guy. He's incredibly intimidating. I mean, he has kind of like he's an alpha male for sure, if anybody's ever an alpha male. And so he said, he summoned the owners, like, call them over. And I was like, okay, Craig Spector, you um, and so I asked him, so who owns this joint? And he said, this woman came over, and I said, this is my friend Craig Spector. He's an author. And then, Craig had this big box full of Skip and Spector books, and he said, "Hi, my name's Craig Spector. I'm an author. These are my books." And he's picking up like, he's the poor woman had absolutely no idea who, she's in the presence of a legend, right? So he's like handing her copies of The Bridge and The Scream and The Light at the End and The Cleanup, and I'm like, yeah, he's Greg Spector, is the man, right? And she's like, oh wow. And she said, so I understand that you need some help. I want to do a benefit for you guys, and I want to bring some of my friends over and to help you out to do a little reading. what he meant by friends was, okay, so R.C. Matheson,
Oh,
right, the son of, you know, horror legend Richard Matheson is also a TV writer. He helmed the A-Team for a couple of seasons. He was all over Twilight Zone magazine when that was around. He's a rock and roll drummer. Um, he can do it all, man.
mhm,
And his brother is the guy who created Bill and Ted. You know, so the entire family is legendary. And then another one of Craig's buddies, right, is Krista Faust. You know, the who at that point in time was a dominatrix. She was like working as a professional dominatrix. She was a collaborator with Poppy Z. Brite, pre-transition Poppy Z. Brite, and also had written a novel called Control Freak, which was very badass. And she was married to a guy named David J. Scow, right?
mhm,
Who was, you know, I mean, he's wrote the screenplay for Texas Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, the original, and co-wrote uh, a little, you know, movie called The Crow with John Shirley. And so you got David J. Scowl there and a number of other people. So a couple like a maybe a couple of weeks later, right? Craig shows up with the Splat Pack in tow, right? And it
mhm,
was just like I was just sitting there going, "Damn, nobody showed up." You know, it's because
mhm,
nobody. It was just kind of a mismatch in terms of venues because these are intense guys,
mhm,
and this is more like a mellow, like a coffee bar for like beat poetry and such, you know, and not particularly like so much like splatterpunk, you know.
mhm,
So it was an amazing and unique cultural event that nobody attended. But if you were there, you were like, God damn, it's just Steven J. Scour.
mhm,
Whatever. I mean, these guys created like they're, you know, like I think Stephen King basically, he's endorsed entire lines like the Del Abyss line, right? He famously endorsed Cemetery Dance magazine, and he also just blanket endorsed, you know, the splatterpunks, right? Like when Stephen King says these guys are okay, they're okay, right? And so, at any rate, so speaking of splatterpunks, now there's a guy, Paul M. Salmon. Paul is a really is a good friend of mine, known him since 1994, and he edited the very first now out of print splatterpunk anthology called, oddly enough, Splatterpunks Extreme Horror, and this is Paul's book that it came out from St. Martin's Press,
mhm,
and it's got this is the one where I got the Stephen King blurb. It says the most vital and visceral horror coalition operating today, Stephen King, on the Splatterpunks. And this has everybody. So it's got like and you were in the Hand of Doom anthology
mhm.
with Paul's. So this is what Paul wrote to me.
Nice.
Thank you. He also, so this has a piece by Clive Barker. It's got R.C. Matheson, Wayne Allen Sally, George R. R. Martin, um, the late great Philip Nutman, Robert Lands, Chaz Balin, Rex Miller, um, and Mick Garris. I'm trying to get Mick Garris on board with the Clive Barker book. So let's so this does contain Clive Barker, and I want to talk about some Clive in the the time that we have left. We have about half an hour
Mhm,
left. This has gone very, very Very well. So, Clive Barker. Now, you'd mentioned that, the movie Hellraiser, which this was the
Mhm.
basis, the Hellbound Heart, this novel, The Hellbound Heart, was the
Mhm.
basis for Hellraiser, and that was, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was your introduction to Clive's work. And
Yes,
what was it that really captured your imagination, Thomas, about Clive Barker?
it was different. It was different from anything else that I had seen before or since. Uh, Prior to my writing, uh, now, like I said, I've written forever, but prior to me wanting to actually write stories and novels, I was a big horror movie fan forever.
Yeah,
At one point, I probably had several hundred DVDs, horror DVDs,
yeah.
and most of them were horrible. And I don't mean horrible as in horror; I mean just stupid, horrible stuff. So when something like Hellraiser comes around and it's different, and it just grabs you. There's just something about it that grabbed me. And I thought, who wrote this stuff? And and then I found out who Clive Barker was, and it's like, and what's really interesting too is I had never read Clive Barker, and who was the other one? When I had my first book published, my publisher said that I reminded him of Clive Barker, and there was somebody else. I can't remember who the other one was, but I had never read either of them. But he said that's what it reminded him of the first book I wrote. But so I thought I got to find out who this guy is. Now of course then I saw, so I watched any movie that had anything to do with him, like
Yeah.
Midnight Meat Train.
Oh, yes. That
So
has
cool.
what's her face from the now I
I don't even remember who was in it. I'm so fascinated by that guy with the hammer.
that
It
guy with a
was,
hammer, but it
oh
had
God.
help me out, Brooke Shields. Brooke
Oh,
Shields plays a baddie.
I don't even remember that she was in it.
Yeah, she plays the
It was
bad
just,
guy.
I was just so fascinated by the whole concept. It was like, wow. And that's probably what attracted me in the first place. It was just different,
Yes,
something different. Not, so many of the bad horror uh, movies that I had, they're all the same formula. The teenagers and you have the jock and the slutty girl and the virgin. Just like when they made Scary Movie. Scary Movie
exactly.
was a good spoof because it's like you could line up 30 movies that were just like that.
Right.
They might, and it's kind of like a book that has a really cool cover, and then you read it, and it's like this is garbage.
I know, right?
And so what happened was I'd get frustrated with these bad movies, and just like when you're sitting and playing guitar and somebody else is playing a song, you say I could play that better. It's like
Right.
I could write something better than what's going on in this movie.
Right.
So, and that's why I think that's probably why I write the way I write. I don't have a plan. I don't have an outline. I just sit down and start writing.
Yeah.
So I never know when I start writing if it's going to be a short story, a novel, a novella, or a novel. I never know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And usually I'm writing it and I'm sitting here. It's like watching a movie for the first time. And that's why I enjoy doing it. Like I'm writing and I'm just like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen next. It's like,
Right.
what do you mean you wonder what's going to happen next? You're the one writing it. And I don't know. I don't know where it's going to go, and that's the
Yeah.
exciting part. And that's what keeps me writing. I'll
Yeah.
start out writing a simple paragraph, and then, well, I'll ask myself questions, and then I'll start writing some more. And before you know it, I got a story, or I got something else going on. And sometimes I have to go back and rewrite a section so it matches what happens down the road. Not necessarily rewrite, but maybe tweak a little bit so it matches what curve it took, is because I never know where it's going.
Yeah.
And to me is, I think I've only ever written one story where it all came to me beginning, middle, and end at one time.
Right.
And that was a short story, and it was boring because I knew where it was going. I just, just like the one I should finish up today for your Beatles anthology. I had no idea what I was going to do, and I just sat down and started writing. And I kind of like it's actually kind of twisted. You'll see when you
Oh,
get it
nice.
later today or tomorrow.
Okay, I do not mind some twistedness. Kind of reminds me, I mean, you're talking about like, there's some people who, who like have to have everything worked out, and that's great. Whatever works, I would say, my advice to any aspiring writers is just like whatever works for you, because
Yeah.
there's some people who like charge inordinate amounts of money for, for workshops. There are also people, they're editors who just want to be gatekeepers of, how to write,
Oh
And
yeah.
for me, it's just like I what I can offer is I can't offer a whole bunch of money to authors, just maybe an honorarium if people, request it. But what I can offer is just like giving them the freedom to do what they do best. I mean, like example, Caitlin R. Kiernan um, gave me a deep cut for the Burroughs, the first Burroughs book that you're in as well. Um, and this story is called The Ballad of a Catamite Revolver. It's about what 15 pages without paragraphing. I mean, it's just like one stream of consciousness,
Mm.
cyber cyberpunk story, the sort of very, very William Gibson and Blade Runner, but it doesn't have a plot because Caitlin does not believe in plots.
Hmm.
And I thought I was very honored that Caitlin would send me this thing because, a lot of editors would just say, "What?
Yep.
So it doesn't have paragraphs? It's it what? And there's people who've never read James Joyce.
Hmm.
For me, I was sort of like, well, this is like the Penelope chapter in Ulysses. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. This is great stuff. It doesn't have a plot. It's really conceptually engaging. For me,
Hmm.
some of my favorite authors are people like, have you read Bruce Sterling
No.
at all? He's a science fiction author, cyberpunk guy who came up with people like John Shirley and William Gibson. I highly recommend him. He's very, very cool. And I think as an engineer, I think he would really appreciate his sort of extrapolation and just like very, very novel concepts that he came up with, like smart buildings that sort of assemble themselves, buildings
Hmm.
you can eat. Um, and he's got more concepts per paragraph than most authors have in an entire novel or five novels series for that matter. Um, so in the very brief time that we have left, that sounds ominous, doesn't it?
It's kind of like what did I see the other day? Um, have a nice day sounds really nice, but enjoy the next 24 hours
Our
sounds menacing.
It does, right? Yes. Yes, there's an old Chinese saying, may you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, thank you, I guess. Um, so in the time that we have left on this program for this episode of the program, I have to be very specific now. Oh, shung, 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 shung. Um, so what were your kind of like the um authors that really inspired you when you were a child? It's a cliche question, but it's a good one.
Um, the regarding the horror genre, I mean, I read a lot of stuff that everybody reads, the classics, Jack London and all those things. But really, what got me into horror was Edgar Allan Poe. I
Yes.
I knew who he was. I knew he was some, as Bill and Ted might say, some dead guy who wrote horror movies. I knew he's some dead dude who wrote horror movies or
Yeah.
horror stories. I knew who he was, and one of my older sisters had brought back an Edgar Allan Poe book from school and must have left it out. And I was at home alone; nobody was around,
Right.
and being a curious kid, uh, I decided to pick up the book and look through it, and I came upon this story called A Telltale Heart, and it looked short enough that I wouldn't take too much time to read. And I read it and had the crap scared out of me, and I loved it. I just loved it. And I at that time had always loved horror. I've always had a love hate relationship with horror. From the time I was a little kid, I had the Aurora models of the
Me
Universal
too.
monsters, and if I had a car model, it was one of the Big Daddy Roth Digger
Nice.
models. That was the big eyes hanging out and
Yeah.
everything. And so I always liked horror, but it was a love hate thing. I had monster models and pictures all over my bedroom, but I slept with the covers over my head because I was terrified. Like that little piece of material would protect me from the monsters when they came to
Yeah.
get me. Um, and so this thing was just reading Edgar Allan Poe was just like, I would love to do that, be able to scare some little kid someday.
Right.
Yeah, that
And
was one of my biggest inspirations. Then later, of course, uh, just reading just about everybody. Big Dean Koontz fan, uh,
nice. Yeah.
Stephen King fan,
Sure.
Clive Barker,
Yeah.
all the big names and lesser names. As I started writing, I got more familiar working in these anthologies.
Yeah.
Although I write so much that I have very little time to read, and I should read more, and
Yeah.
I should read all these anthologies, but I just don't because the demand for writing. And when I say I have a demand for writing, it's not like there's publishers out there beating my head in saying I need this by a certain time.
Yeah.
It's just that my muses won't let me alone. And I'll be in the middle of writing one thing, and all of a sudden I'll get an idea for another one. So I'll have to
Right.
make a little note about that, finish this one, or like the other day with the idea for the Beatles
Yeah.
anthology or your Paw anthology. Things like that come up, and I have to write them. And so I just keep writing. And so then the only time I really have to read is in my car, which is usually an audiobook.
Yeah.
So that's what I usually do because I am an audiobook junkie. I used to have an hour ride to work and back. And so I'd listen to books, and sometimes I'd have to travel for business and I would listen to books.
Yeah.
So I got to listen to a lot of people that I wouldn't take the time to read murder mysteries, Robert B. Parker, that sort of thing.
Yeah. We were
I
talking
read
about
everything,
Parker.
everything. In fact, he's where I got the idea to dedicate all my books to my wife because he dedicated all
Oh,
his books
nice.
to his wife. I'm pretty sure almost every one. Yeah.
Wow. I actually like he was kind of inspired me because of the whole like Spencer for Hire, that being
Yeah.
the name of a great poet, right? And so who wrote the Fairy Queen. And I was thinking, so I created this detective character named Jambo Krumholtz, who's basically he's like a metaphysical detective, and he will show up at a crime scene and basically, you know, argue with the police. He's a philosopher and he wants to deconstruct the entire idea of crime. Like he's
Mhm.
arguing with the police. Well, we can't really demarcate, the difference between a crime scene and a body, and what is murder anyway, and what and
Mhm.
they're just trying to get rid of his ass. And so he's kind of like he's a joker. He's a fun character to play around with. And so anyway, enough about that. But so I'm trying to think. So oh yeah, I was going to ask you, of all you've been writing and putting this work out for 15 years. What's the best fan response that you've ever had?
Hmm. Ironically, probably the best response I've ever had was to my memoir, The Growing Up Scoop Book.
Yeah,
A lot of people like that. But again, a lot of the people that like that were from the town I grew up in.
sure,
So
of course.
it's normal. Um, it's hard to say. There was one, I don't remember it exactly, but there was one person had written to my publisher and said that they really enjoyed my writing, and they were the first person that said uh, when they're finished reading my story, it doesn't go away; it stays with them, and
Yeah,
they take it kind of is there all the time,
cool.
and that was kind of nice. nice. Uh, I don't pay a whole lot of attention to reviews, positive or negative,
Oh, okay, that's good.
because if it's a good one,
Yeah.
I think I'm all that in a bag of chips, and then the next day I might get one, the exact same story. One person could think you're an idiot, and somebody else thinks you're great.
Yeah,
And
right,
I learned that early on because I might get a bad review for something, and I realized, I can't take too much. I can't take them seriously,
right.
but then I can't take the positive one seriously. I could take the attitude that a
Yeah.
bad review came from some nudnik who's living in his mom's basement, frustrated writer. But
Yeah.
then I also have to say maybe the good review came from some guy who was living in his mom's
You
basement
never
as a
know,
frustrated
right?
writer. So I don't really pay much attention to them because I write for myself.
Right.
I write, if somebody said, "Who's your favorite author?" I'd have to say me.
That's a
Because I never know what I'm going to write next. I never know what's going to happen, and I enjoy it. And what's really funny is
yeah.
if I go back, like recently, my publisher took some of my books and went through an AI system for audiobook
Uh-huh.
voice generating. And although it's only about 95%, they're not great yet, but they're pretty good. Uh, I got to listen to this, like an older book that I haven't, proofread or anything
Yeah.
probably in a decade. And it's like, hey, that's pretty good. I'm not,
Wow.
you know, and I figured, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have any, shout outs you want to give?
I well, two things. One to my publisher, Sunbury Press. Their imprint Hellbender Books is who publishes my horror books and my cartoon books. And excuse me, there's a company called Crave Press who
Hmm.
publish my memoirs as well as a technical manual I never told you about, but that's boring stuff. But a technical manual for organizing files and things like that. A system I developed over the years that I've used on
Cool.
the job. But yes, and also two Nocturnicorn Corn books and all the anthologies that I've
Yes.
been in and will continue to be in.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And also Screaming Eye Press
Screaming Eye
is
Press.
the company that usually once a month or every 2 months, either one of my cartoons or one of my short stories is
Cool.
in their magazine. It's always fun. Yeah, they keep me doing stuff, make it fun, and yeah.
Cool. Okay. I want to give three. I'm going to keep this to three people. Jonathan Maybury, actually four people. Jonathan Maybury, Nicole H. Six, Michael H. Hansen, and Benjamin Adams. You know, we love you. So love working with you. And so how can people get in touch with you, Thomas?
Um, well, they could email me at
Okay.
if they can spell my last name Malaf as in Frank Arina at msn.com. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is a business card with a QR code on it.
Oh, wow. That's so
And
cool.
if you scan that QR code, it will take you to my website where you can click on a book. I don't know if it'll work over this, but you can click on a book and it'll take you where you can buy them on Amazon.
That's so badass.
Yeah, and it's also you can just go to www.thomasmmalafarina.com with no period, all one word, thomasmmalafarina.com, and that lists, there's a bibliography that lists. It's like 20 miles long that lists there all of my stories and where they've been, and I'll have to send you a link for that sometime so
Cool.
you can see it. And then also has this page where you can get all my books.
I was just looking for a Sheldon Woodbury book that he sent me, very kindly sent me. But would you come back when I have Sheldon
Oh,
on?
absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
cool.
I'd love doing this again,
Okay, great.
especially now that I have sound.
Yeah. So just I have to put in a plug for our upcoming books. So next up from Nocturnicorn Books, you will all be tremendously excited and happy. If you're a music fan, if you're a fan of culture, if you like good stories, poetry, if you like, um, you know, if you like Bowie, if you're a fan of David Bowie, I think you will really, really appreciate what we have in store for you. Now, I'm just going to name just a handful of the names that we have. Okay, we have Sharon Michelle LaVey, who's the high priestess in the Church of Satan, who is the leader of the international, satanic movement and the author of Anton LaVey Illuminated. This is her book, and yes, he is a Satanist. Ooh, scary, scary, scary. It has her good friend. So she's writing about the occult significance of David Bowie, right? She being the expert, and we have Nicole H. Wrote us a piece for that book as well. So now, if you're a music fan, of course, and you're into, you're a horror fan, music fan, chances are you're into the band Bauhaus. And we have a piece by none other than David J. Haskins, the founder of Bauhaus and Love and Rockets, the guy who wrote Bela Lugosi's Dead. That one is a contributing author to this book. David Moondust will cover you a literary tribute to David Bowie. We have an exclusive interview with. I'm going to try to do this without having all my books fall on my head. If they do, then well, it's been nice knowing you. But the okay, I managed to do it. So an exclusive interview with Mr. Tony Zanetta, the author of Stardust, the David Bowie story. And he was besides being a Bowie insider, the president of Main Man Entertainment, the road manager for Ziggy Stardust and the Spider from Mars, and the Diamond Dogs tour, essentially helped he and Angie Bowie and David Bowie colluded to craft, the Ziggy Stardust persona. But he was also played Andy Warhol in a little play called Andy Warhol's Pork. So this is Tony Zanetta, and I, did a extensive interview for this book, and this is what he wrote to me very nicely. He's a very nice and gracious man. And so we have Tony Zanetta, we have Hannah Breshard, who is a very, very well-known rock journalist and entrepreneur and promoter and rock critic and uh, best known for being the space cadet in the movie Cracked Actor from 1973, which is available for free online. So if you want to see the origin story of Hannah Breshard, we have a story by two-time World Fantasy and Bram Stoker Award-winning author, known by the New York Times as one of our essential authors of dark fiction, Caitlin R. Kiernan. We have a original by Bram Stoker Award winner John Palisano, and it goes on and on and on like that. We just got Simon Strancis, or actually Simon Strancis is in the Barker book. Getting ahead of myself. So, Moondust will cover you a literary tribute to David Bowie is unique, is absolutely unique insofar as we have the, you know, Bela Lugosi's Dead was, of course, plays out in the opening credits to The Hunger, starring David Bowie, right? So, and I'm trying to get Billy Martin on board as well, and so, um, big squeezy hugs to you, Thomas, and we'll be in touch.
So, yeah,
And so, and I'd love to have you back on the show with
absolutely.
Sheldon. Okay, cool.
Anytime.
Have a great day, and I look forward to that Beatles story.
Yep, you'll get it soon. Okay.
Okay, take care, my friend.
Yeah.
Bye bye.